If you remember a few months ago, in the heat of the proxy battle between the Walt Disney Company and Nelson Peltz's Trian Group, Disney released a investor report with a lot of information in it. And some of that information was rather questionable, at least in the way it was presented. And we tore it apart here on Valiant Renegade. And it was so egregious that even folks at Forbes magazine took it to task, namely our friend Caroline Reed. And wouldn't you know it, right after this earnings call, there was another report put out to investors that, well, we're going to do the same thing. Renegade Online. This is from a report that Disney put out in tandem this morning with the earnings call. And you can see here, this is a puff piece, right? And look, it's pretty looking. Disney hasn't really done something like this before. And they're talking about how broad the portfolio is. Look, you can buy Disney products, you can play Disney games, you can go to the parks, you can stream, you can watch in the movies and TV and yada, yada, yada. Obviously, here they're talking about some of the big highlights of the quarter and coming up. Inside Out 2. Inside Out drove over 1.3 million Disney Plus signups. Now, again, that was in the quarter, is what they're saying. Or it says of the original film globally, generated over 100 million views of the original film globally since the first Inside Out 2 teaser trailer dropped. So actually, I'm reading that now. That's over a lot longer period of time because this quarter they only had an upshot of about 800,000 subscribers total for Disney Plus. Touting a lot of the things that are coming forward, right? It's a nice presentation, supposed to make you feel really warm and fuzzy. You notice, again, we kind of got the same thing going on here. Remember we talked about this before with the whole Nelson Peltz situation? And we showed you how they showed the success of the Disney franchises over the years. And they showed Toy Story instead of all of Pixar. And Avengers movies instead of all of Marvel, right? It wasn't Marvel, it was the Avengers. So basically, all of the individual character movies, both successful and bad, were left to the wayside. Everything in Marvel Phases 4 and 5 wasn't included in their alleged return on investment slide that they were trying to grease investors with to fend off Nelson Peltz and Ike Perlmutter. So we've got the same stuff here. And then, of course, they throw in Avatar, which, okay, fine. But, of course, one of these things is not like the other, and that is the fact that Avatar, Disney doesn't own Avatar. James Cameron owns Avatar, Lightstorm Entertainment. Disney's the distributor for Avatar for sure, and they've got some theme parks built in. They've gone in partnership with it. But that's really, they don't make Avatar. James Cameron does. Star Wars. 3 films. That's the first thing. We're still suggesting, apparently, and I find this interesting, that 3 Star Wars films are coming in 2026 and 27. 3. We knew of 1 for sure. There had been talk of 3. There was talk of The Mandalorian and Grogu. Obviously, that is a thing, right? Then there was talk of a Rey Palpatine movie with Daisy Ridley. We told you, and Pro told you, it was coming. Sure enough, last year, Star Wars Celebration, Daisy Ridley was walked out on stage to announce that she'd be coming back for a 4th Disney Star Wars film. A lot of people didn't think that was going to happen. It did. So we can throw that one in there. Then there's this Sean Levy thing that's being talked about now. Today, we saw Sean Levy making comments or something about this. Excited to get into Star Wars, tell his own story, whatever that is. I'm a little surprised that they still have this notion that this will happen between 26 and 27. At least 3 of them. That's a big ask right now because not a single one of them has really started principal photography yet. Mandalorian and Grogu has done some. I think they're just now starting principal photography. I think if the rumors were correct within the last week or two. That's an aggressive timeline for 2020, between 26 and 27. That's 3 Star Wars movies that have to be shot and done in the next couple of years. That's not a lot of time. We're already halfway through 24. Nearly $6 billion in combined global box office. A lot of people like to come back to this. Oh, look, Star Wars made $6 billion. That's what people spent at the theaters buying movie tickets. That's not what Disney got. Disney would have gotten back about half of that. So again, this is a puff piece, right? To show how, look, even though the parks are suffering and none of the Star Wars stuff is doing well on Disney Plus, and nobody watched The Acolyte. The Acolyte wasn't brought up on the earnings call today at all. I wonder why. This is the issue. $6 billion combined global box office. We know factually only about $3 billion of that would have come back to Disney, thereabout. That would have been their take coming back to Disney distribution. The other $3 billion would have stayed with theaters, both here in North America and abroad. The problem is Disney spent almost $2 billion filming those 5 movies. We had the receipts. We have the financial returns that the Walt Disney Company filed in the United Kingdom for those 5 movies. We know down to the penny what they spent. It was just shy of $1.9 billion, if memory serves. I did a video on it last year. It was Star Wars, how much it really cost, or something along those lines. And that wouldn't have included the marketing, the advertising to put those films into theaters. That would have been roughly about another $1 billion, if not perhaps even more. So altogether, Disney spent $3 billion to produce and market 5 films into theaters for Star Wars, and they got about $3 billion back. Sorry, guys, they really didn't make any money. That's just, them's the facts. Can't help you there. The Mandalorian is the most watched Disney Plus original series to date. Let's stop there and take that in. The Mandalorian is the most watched Disney Plus original series to date. And Mando Season 3 had like half the audience of Mando Season 2. Mando Season 1, I think, was bigger than Mando Season 3 in terms of consumption. And that thing came out when Disney Plus had not but 10 million subscribers. That's what launched Disney Plus in 2019. Mando Season 2 just a year later. Disney has twice as many subscribers today, especially in North America and Western Europe, at least twice as many subscribers today as they did when Mando Season 2 finished up with Luke Skywalker. And nothing else has been able to surpass it. That alone gives me some pause right there. That's really the best you got. And that's another series that they've killed. Guests have built over, and I found this one interesting. Guests have built over 1.5 million droids and 1.2 million lightsabers at Galaxy's Edge. Now, you guys out there got to help me out. How much are these lightsaber builds at Galaxy's Edge? I mean, I know some of y'all have been there. I haven't at the shop. Aren't they like $200? Pretty good return there. So, they've sold almost $250 million in retail sales of custom lightsabers. But Galaxy's Edge has been open for 5-6 years? So that's about $25 million a year they've been selling in lightsabers on average. For all we know, it could have been $50 million in the first year, and then it's gone down since then, which is what I suspect is going on. Galaxy's Edge at Walt Disney World and Disneyland Resort remains one of our most popular and immersive lands, #1 in guest satisfaction. I was at the one in Orlando. I might take issue with that, but that's just me. And I'm expanding this a little bit so I can slide this up on the screen. Okay, this is what's getting people. Over $1 billion in annual retail sales. Let's pause on this one. Over $1 billion, in annual retail sales, okay? Right there. Retail merch, Star Wars merch. Again, This does not stipulate over what period. And this is what I hate. Okay? Over $1 billion in annual retail sales. What, from 2012 to 2017? Every single year since 2012? 2015 to now? I have just last year? I don't know. Over $1 billion in annual retail sales. And then it's got the little 3 there next to it for the footnote. Okay? And it says estimated third party, right there, y'all can see it right here, estimated third party retail sales incorporating the company's licensed IP. Okay? I don't know over what period this is, but again, if we read Disney's own financial returns, where they have specifically mentioned Star Wars merchandise sales on more than a couple of occasions in the last couple of years, they have said that Star Wars merchandise sales and licensing revenues have been down the last several years, except for, until recently, classic Star Wars, meaning pre-Disney Star Wars, pre-Rey Palpatine, pre-Kylo Ren. I mean, they could be citing over $1 billion in annual retail sales. That could have been from 2019. That could have been $1 billion in annual retail sales from 2015 when The Force Awakens comes out. I believe that because I know we saw figures that said there was north of $750 million on the retail sales side for Star Wars that year, when between 2015 and 2016 when that came out. And we know it dropped off precipitously after, guess which movie? My point is that these numbers don't mean anything absent appropriate context. And the other side of this is, and I want to make this clear, that is retail sales. That is not money in Disney's pocket. $1 billion in annual retail sales is money in the pockets of Amazon, Target, Walmart, flashback 10 years when Disney was selling it, Toys R Us when they were still around, right? That's $1 billion in cash register ring-ups at retail stores. Of that, a piece goes back to the manufacturer of that merchandise. Hasbro, Mattel, Legos, whatever. Then they have to take out their manufacturing costs, and a piece of that goes back to Disney. So Disney is getting a small fraction at the end of the day of these billion-dollar annual retail sales. They're getting a cut, and they're not going poor on it, but Disney is not, and people like to say Disney made $1 billion. Yeah, everybody says The Last Jedi. Y'all had to know that one. I can't say with 1,000% certainty, but I would bet a couple $100 I got sitting around here in cash. I'd bet that Disney hasn't seen $1 billion in retail sales for Star Wars products in at least a couple of years. The last time that might have been close to that was Mando Grogu, and that's fallen off a cliff. Toy Story. Why would there still be $1 billion in annual retail sales for Toy Story in 2023 and 24? We haven't had a movie in 5 years at this point. I seriously doubt that Toy Story is still selling at those kinds of levels right now. This is meant to make people feel happy while Bob Iger is sitting on the phone and telling them that the theme parks aren't doing that well. And he's looking them in the face and telling them that, and we don't expect them to get much better for the next few quarters. But look at this pretty chart. $1 billion. And people, they don't want to read the footnotes. They don't want to ask the questions that should be jumping out at them. And again, I'm used to this now with Disney because they put almost the same thing out to try to get rid of Nelson Peltz back in February. There was that slide that we talked about before, Star Wars, Toy Story, Avengers, and it showed what Disney called ROI, return on investment. And it had Star Wars like 2.9x and And then Avengers, not all of Marvel again, but the Avengers of 3.3 and Toy Story of 5. They had all these numbers on there. And then when you actually read the footnotes, when you read the markups for it, what they were describing was not ROI. In fact, it was so egregious that if you recall, our friend over at Forbes magazine, Miss Caroline Reed, did a massive write-up in Forbes about how Disney was just blowing smoke and mirrors with this ridiculous investor report. Because what they were describing as ROI wasn't even actually ROI. They were trying to finagle the numbers in such a way to where they could get the highest value possible to show how successful Star Wars was and how successful Marvel was, even though they weren't quoting all of Marvel. They just said the Avengers, but they knew what they were doing. They wanted you to think all of Marvel. Like, oh, then phases 4 and 5, all the really crappy movies from the MCU, they must be doing fine. But I want to show you what I'm talking about here. This time, to prove the point, there are no figures on here. There's no ROI. There's no metrics on here. They're not trying to say return on investment. They're not trying to say return on capital. They're making no statements of that anymore. They're just saying this is how much is done in box office. This is how much is this. They're leaving it as vague as possible, and they're not trying to present any conclusions that some might consider potentially fraudulent. Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.